So when I think about selling creativity, I think about it as like the agencies really need to plan for it as like a utility inside of their business. It's like, hey, this is here. This is what you can access. It's available. I have a process. I have a system. I have a cost structure that works, and it's not super complicated. And we use it when we use it, but when we don't use it, I'm not stressing out that I have 3 full-time creatives that I'm like, how am I going to keep their day busy?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the High Level Spotlight Sessions, where we showcase awesome marketers doing awesome marketing. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Russ Perry. He's the founder, creator, and CEO of a little company called Design Pickle, which you've probably heard of. Russ, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. And it's been a minute since I've been called a marketer. So I hope that I can deliver on that title. I still have a few ideas I send my team every now and again. Some of them are ignored, but I love marketing through and through. That's where I got my start.
Nice. And let's start there. So, I mean, Design Pickle, I think, is a somewhat of a household name in the marketing world. It has gone through some interesting evolutions, but I caught a piece of your talk in Costa Rica. Yeah. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, I'm pretty sure he said he had an agency back in the beginning. So take me back. What is the origin story here?
Yeah. And, it's funny because I also caught a lot of the talks there in Costa Rica too. And the thing that I could think of the entire time at that event, it was like, damn, I wish I had an agency today. Because when I had an agency, right, 10 plus years ago, life was a lot harder. There was a lot less sexy tools out there. But yeah, so my upbringing really took kind of 3 phases in terms of my professional career. The first was just as an employee. I worked for big brands. The most famous was with Apple on their higher education sales and marketing team, helping with big product launches at the Arizona state level for like the iPod and like the old iPod that had the rotating wheel and all of that. And so that was super fun. I worked for a company, division of LG. Like most people know, they're electronic manufacturers. I worked for the way less sexy division of countertops. So I became like an expert in marketing solid surface countertops, and then took all of that experience and launched my first like branding and design agency. And I did that for almost a decade, 2 different forms of that. But we were really focused on B2B brands. So designing a lot of content, the core brands themselves, and updating, kind of older companies that needed to be more relevant. And then all of the digital and in-person strategies for demand acquisition for those brands. So trade show marketing, early days of HubSpot. I was a HubSpot reseller for a while, which was a whole disaster of a story I can tell you about. Easy to sell, hard to support. That's my 2 cents on that thing. But yeah, and then, that was exciting, but ultimately really made, just about every mistake in the book of how to scale, how to systematize my agency. So it was always just a huge grind for new business, new clients, and retention. So the day came where I just said, you know what? I have an agency heart. I know it through and through. I've been in the trenches, but I got to do something different. And at that time I was doing, juggling about 6 different consulting engagements to keep the lights on in the Perry home. And out of that balancing act came this need, like, hey, I need design. I need stuff quickly. It's like I need an employee, but I can't afford an employee, but I don't want to go to the marketplaces because they're so inconsistent. And actually created Design Pickle for my first 6 clients. And it was a on-demand kind of graphic design vending machine, to really simplify it. And they started loving it. And to the point where they were like, hey, that like 5 and 6 figure dollar branding strategy you're doing? We don't really care about that, but these business cards and these online ads, like this, thank you so much for this. And that was that was the light bulb moment. So we launched in 2015 with the brand and the logo that stayed the same. And
so wait, I got to jump in there.
Yeah, totally.
Design Pickle is such a fun brand. If you've ever seen these guys at trade shows and stuff, they have the by far the coolest booth. It's like so intricate and it's all green. And then they have a pickle costume and like everything is pickle themed. So what's up with pickles, Russ? Where this are you a
Well,
super fan?
we used to give out pickles too. By the way, that's if you know,
I love pickles.
if you're old school, you know, problem with pickles is I could write a whole pillar blog post on the problems with shipping and procuring pickles. What can go wrong with pickle juice everywhere? So we no longer do that. But the name actually came because my agency names were so horrible. They were hard to say, hard to spell. No one could ever hear them. And when I started my third business, I was like, I need a clear name that no one can forget and no one's going to ask me how to spell it. And I love fermented foods. I always joke that design sauerkraut really didn't go well. And honestly, the domain was available. It was like a 5-minute branding exercise of like, what do I like? We're going to do design. Pickle's a funny thing. Everyone kind of has an opinion. So, but yeah, we've leaned in hard to the pickles. It's definitely part of our brand culture here at Design Pickle and you don't have to like pickles to work here. You just have to have an opinion on pickles. That's the main requirement.
You just have to fake it as you shove them down your throat.
Yeah, or we have people who hate it and they're like the outliers. They're like the guy if you ever played craps, there's like the bet on black, like you can bet against everybody else. Like the anti-pickle tribe is strong at Design Pickle, even internally.
That's funny. No, I love it. I love it. I was so pumped when everyone thought it would be a good idea to create a mascot at high level, because once you have that kind of identity and you have a mascot, it opens up so many doors creatively with what you can do with your marketing, right?
Well, and I did so much marketing in B2B tech, and my angle was always like have fun and make people laugh. And it's not like it's this crazy strategy, but I found that it builds trust immediately. And that's like an underutilized thing in a lot of B2B space. It's definitely used in consumer branding all the time, but like I found with the pickle guy and the pickles, it was like, it just broke down that wall immediately and people would respond in a fun way. And then you can actually be like, all right, now tell me about your design needs. And you've created that connection quicker. So from day one, it was by intention to have that fun component with it. And to this day, you know, while we've matured our brand and we are like much different company than 8 years ago, 7.5, 8 years ago, I find like you have a pickle, someone's going to laugh. They're going to tell you a funny story and then you can get to business.
That's great. Yeah. It's like a built-in icebreaker.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk about, you know, I saw you use a phrase selling creativity, which I absolutely loved. So I ran an agency for, I think it was like 7 years, and we called ourselves a full service agency. In the beginning, we were outsourcing graphic stuff, but by the end, we had a team of 2 or 3 full-time graphic designers who were fantastic. But we learned a lot of lessons the hard way. And I think you illustrated a very interesting point, which is every business has these random kind of needs, like business cards, right? Like if you hit the market and you're like, man, I'm a PPC expert and no one's going to beat me at PPC and I'm going to get laser focused on that. And you start running ads for people, I guarantee you at least one of them will be like, yeah, the ads are awesome, but could you by chance help us with our business cards? And stuff like that, right?
Like some random request that comes in. Exactly.
Yeah. And that often throws people into a bind because it's like, you don't want to say no to your customers. You don't want to risk them leaving you for an agency who does more things or offers more services and whatnot. But while that's true, I don't think we ever looked at it as selling creativity as a service in general, which is pretty interesting. So talk to me about that idea of kind of that term and what that means to you.
Well, absolutely. And let me identify another bucket. So the bucket you identified is sort of like the, you know, no offense to creatives and creative deliverables, but I call it like the junk drawer. It's like, hey, I need this, or hey, can you do this? Or the CEOs, we're doing a holiday party, or we're doing whatever. And the problem with these requests is that by themselves, they're innocent. They don't take a lot of time. You know, as a customer service champion, you want to support your clients, and the more they spend, the more you want to help them. But on the aggregate, it can become consuming and distracting and really start to eat into it. So then there's that. And then there's the other side of it, which is like, I love this client. They have a great product, but man, their brand is terrible. Like what they are giving me is awful. And like you have the moral imperative to help them. Like, by like just refreshing this, it's gonna do better from the visuals, from the stopping power. Let's say you're doing paid ad or whatever it is. So the problem with these two things is often they're never scoped. You never really go into the engagement with them, but in some regard, like you're going to do them or you want to help and you just kind of feel like you're going to be in there. So when I see those, like the reality is that we never, as agencies or as previous agency owners, it's like we don't accommodate for space for those things and we try to jam them in. Or on the flip side, we come out super heavy with the client and say, hey, by the way, we need to do all this kind of stuff for you, this to work. And the client's like, I don't even understand what you're talking about. Like, I just want new leads. Like, and you're talking about brand standards, you're talking about all this kind of things. And so the first thing that I always like recognize is like any agency needs to have some sort of buffer and safety net for these worlds, because we know it's going to come. It's inevitably going to make our lives easier, especially the latter example when that brand's improved, but we never plan from it from a structural standpoint or a cost standpoint. And when we do try to sell creativity, not everyone, but typically it's this kind of like high and mighty, like perspective, like I am the expert, your brand sucks, let me sell you on all of this design work that you may or may not care about, but I care a lot about. And it's becoming like, it's like this real high tension of expectations versus deliverable, when you like really start to sell into it. So when I think about selling creativity, I think about it as like the agencies really need to plan for it as like a utility inside of their business. It's like, hey, this is here. This is what you can access. It's available. I have a process. I have a system. I have a cost structure that works and it's not super complicated. And we use it when we use it. But when we don't use it, I'm not stressing out that I have 3 full-time creatives that I'm like, how am I going to keep their day busy? And that's what the typical old school agency does when their headcount is like, they get a bunch of work, they hire a bunch of people, they don't have a lot of work, they fire a bunch of people, hire, fire, hire, and fire. Now, I'm old school. I know today, contractors, they're like sub agencies, cool tools have taken a lot of it. But at the end of the day, there's not a lot of planning. And how do I sell creativity, but in a way that isn't going to create this huge burden? And I can say yes to the clients and I have a plan to execute it. And I'm not like pissed at them, like that they're requesting it, because it's necessary. You have to have this creative flow all the time.
Well, that's interesting. And I want to talk a little bit more about process and how to avoid some of the nightmares that I went through in my journey around creative. We can tell some of those war stories, but hearing you talk about it and seeing the term has me kind of shocked that we never really thought of that angle, right? Like we used to sell a hosting package for your website that was just the hosting, right? But then it also included up to 20 minutes of website edits, right? And it's very underutilized, but it's there if they need it. It makes the client feel great because it's like, oh, if I ever need to change a picture or some text or whatever, they're going to take care of me and it's covered in this monthly thing. It makes total sense to also have that for creative, right? It's like, hey, like you had that conversation. Hey, when did you guys have that website built? Oh, like 10 years ago. Yeah, it's safe to say it could use a little revamp, right? Yeah, but we don't have the budget for it. Well, what if we just fired up this really low cost, like creative thing, and we could just chip away at it over time, right? And it's like, you guys can, each month we'll chip away at an hour's worth of this or whatever. To me, that sounds like a great idea because I know it would be underutilized. And if the margin works, I think that's a great way to add revenue.
Well, and that's exactly what I did at the tail end of my agency. Was we actually sold the tools and the packages of the tech, which is easy, super binary to sell software and lead generation and automation, because these things kind of feel real. Problem with creativity, and I talk about this from time to time, is it's super opaque. Like It means one thing to one person, another thing to another person. But what we did at the end of my agency career was what we said, like, look, you have these marketing automation tools, you have these social channels. By the way, there's like way more than there was 10 years ago. You have these communication channels. Now you have in-app, in-app messaging and, all the things that you do. And if they're an e-com brand, you have all of the different, sites and stores and variants of content. Let's just take an estimate of a pulse of what we could do every month to keep these things going. And we actually aggregated that out over 6 or 12-month contract, and then just build a flat rate. I wouldn't call it a retainer, but that's essentially what it was, of creative maintenance. That's all it was creative maintenance. We're just going to continue to go in and, you're not going to see your brand transform overnight, but over 3 or 4 months, you're going to see that LinkedIn banner that you forgot about on your homepage. That's going to get updated, and you're going to get this updated. And then you're going to see this ad that you did proliferated across a couple other variants because we've created, versions of it for you. So that creative maintenance became like the web hosting of what we were selling. Now, I didn't have any flat rate model of providing that at the time, so I had to really navigate the budget and really dial it in carefully. But today, if I'm selling creativity, all I do is I just put a slide up of all the things that need designs, and I just say, who's going to keep this up to date? Like, we can be that person, let us help you with that. And then
I was thinking model exactly out the pricing that. Like, I could envision having a conversation with a list of things, right? Like, how are your business cards looking? How, do you guys have flyers in your office? Yeah. Right. You have those like table tent thingies on the front desk, probably, right? Like, all this stuff. We could just line it up in priority and kind of chip away at it over time. I could see that going really well, a low pressure, because the contrast way to do it is how we used to do it, which is selling it in projects with very rigid revision request process. And that never goes well, right? You get like, all right, you have 5 rounds of revision requests. You get to 3,
nightmare to manage.
Going really well. Oh my gosh. And then,
here's the variable where you make more money is how fast do you need it? So if you just have this non-demanding timeline and you're just doing it great, if this new project comes in and you need it tomorrow or you need it in a week, it's like, okay, well, then there's some flexibility in terms of output and demand that you could have. And if things, are at this casual basis, then fine. But when the volume spikes or the things there, but by removing the revisions and the scope and all of those things, you actually make it a lot less stressful on yourself to manage. And then you find certain things to charge more for, whether it's speed, whether it's, past a certain amount per month that you're doing or hours or whatever it is you want to manage. But how it was where you're like, you're on revision 5 of 5 and you need revision 6 and you're just like, I don't want to tell the client it's like $200 more. I feel like a dick. I don't want to do this. Right. But then if you don't do it, you're like sort of sacrificing your business soul a little bit, and it just created this weird tension. So now you could just say, yeah, sure. No problem. Yeah, we'll get it. As long as it's not a rush, we'll get to it. We'll put it in the queue. It's fine. We'll get it done. Like, bring it on 100%. Inside of that.
So talk to me about how you guys have evolved, because you described the early days as like a design vending machine, which is a pretty cool way to put it. But I know that you guys have evolved as a platform to kind of facilitate a lot of the, in the early days when I remember Design Pickle first came out and stuff, I think I was still running the agency. How old is Design Pickle?
8-year birthday this January. So we're finishing our 8th year. 2015 is when we launched.
Yeah. So back then it was kind of like, well, it sounds great in theory, but I still need a project manager who's going to continually go back and forth with this person on the other end. And so talk to me about how you guys have evolved through a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So the core fundamentals have remained the same since day one. It's you basically hire a fractional graphic designer for a flat rate. So I call it like a 1/6 employee. You get a designer dedicated to you starting $1,000 a month, and they work for you every day. So everyone is like, well, how much can you do? What do you get for that? How many hours? And the answer is like, it kind of depends, because if I'm doing 20 Facebook ad variants, I can do that in a day. That's pretty easy design work. If I'm rebuilding a trade show display and there's all these things, that's going to take longer, right? So, but for businesses, the value is like dedicated contact, daily output, super consistency in terms of the process. And how we've evolved over the years is expansion of what we design. So we started with just graphic design. Today we have that. We do custom illustrations. We do motion graphics. We do presentation designs. And we're launching either 1 or 2 new services next year, which I'm super excited about. Can't talk about, otherwise my product team will get pissed. And then also you mentioned the platform. So the early days, it was like, if you carefully watched one of my online demos, you could like see the email URL, log in without an account, send stuff in. Like it was so easy to hack Design Pickle. Today, we actually have a huge tech team and a platform. But what has come out of that are things like design automation. So you can set our platform up with a Zapier. And you can be integrating, request and file submission and receipt into, your own tools like Asana or into Google Sheets or into other platforms. I've seen super cool hacks with workflows for like podcasters where it's like, I record this podcast, it gets uploaded to this Google Sheet. That's available to the designer who can make a graphic with my brand on the speaker and everything. And that file then is uploaded here. So that's been huge. And one of our biggest focuses over the next 3 months is updating how teams work together inside of Design Pickle. So every account comes with unlimited users. The caveat is if you have 5 people sharing an account, things are going to take a while, and you can always expand your pipe, so to speak. But file sharing, much better collaboration tools inside the platform. So managing
this is the kind of stuff that definitely wasn't there in the beginning.
No way, not even close, not even close. And so we're working on projects, workspaces, tagging, that's all coming out next year, where actually what our vision is that this is your creative hub for the submission, the creation, the collaboration. And imagine a new team member comes on board, they just get the Design Pickle account. They can see all the campaign assets. They can see who designed it, how long it took, when it was designed. And so that's our vision moving ahead, is to make this the one-stop shop for all the parts of creation, not just the request in the file itself.
Yeah, which is great. And I think that's really eliminates a lot of that stuff in the beginning where it's like, well, this is almost feels just like as much work. We're emailing files around and this and that. And now it's kind of all in one place. You can collaborate. We recently used Design Pickle to have some custom illustrations made that we're actually going to give away to you guys in a new template that came out really nice. So it is really nice to have access to, because oftentimes if you hire someone, they're really good at some stuff, right? Maybe graphic design as far as like website elements and stuff. But when you're talking about an illustration, that's really a totally different skill set for as far as an artist or a creative
and we want to take the headache out of procuring the right person from you. Like our tool, we have tons of AI and technology in the background. So if you submit a presentation request, it's going to go to your presentation designer. Next day, if you submit a custom illustration, it'll go to the best custom illustrator for that type of illustration, right? Because that's even, do you want a caricature? Do you want like a fantasy art? And that's, and so we do the thinking behind the scenes. Now, I will say with the caveat, it's still creativity, you still got to provide feedback. You still got to work with them. But at the end of the day, we pride ourselves in supporting our clients too. And that's something that I think is really important, is like, you're going to be working with a company that really cares about the process and understanding what's going on. And so that's another big advantage. You talk about the early days, if you had a problem, it'd just be like, F it, we're not sure, we're not even sure how this is working. And today, it's like, we have this fancy customer success management team where we'll get on a call with you and they'll talk about automations and they'll work with your process. And I'm just like, I can't even believe how mature we are inside of that. But our vision is like, we don't want you to stress about creativity. It's like, even going on, I go to Fiverr sometimes to do audio editing stuff, and that's where I get and it's like always a stressful process. Like, who am I going to get? Do I pay $5 or $500? Like, I'm not sure the price range here.
Nothing's ever $5, which is the fun
not anymore.
Part.
Yeah, not anymore.
So what kind of tips do you have around the process? Because, I think, you guys have done so much to make it easier, but you could still screw it up, right? Like if
Totally.
I'm promising next day turnarounds and all of a sudden I get requests from 4 clients, I'm immediately in a bind here. So talk to me about the tips that you help people with when it comes to, as somebody who's new getting into selling creativity.
Yeah, so I am like 100% biased for Design Pickle because that's my company. But when I give these tips, it doesn't matter what it is and who you use, because technically, if you think about it, a full-time employee is also a flat rate designer, right? Like
Sure.
you pay them every month, flat rate, and that's what you get, a certain amount of output from them. So I think the first thing you have to do is narrow your deliverable scope, period. Saying you're a full service agency and doing everything might sound good on a marketing standpoint, but you gotta, when it comes to creativity, give a scope of work that you can confidently do. And what that scope is, it depends on your supply of design talent or services or whatever it is. So you have to match that one-to-one, because the mistakes I made, sell big creative project A, oh shit, how am I going to do it? And then this process costs time and money and really eats in my margins. And now creativity is not profitable. Creativity is super stressful and really taking up a lot of my time. So you got to match what it is you're marketing and what it is you can confidently provide inside of that. So whether it's a service like ours, an awesome freelancer, a marketplace model where you're putting together people, and have that in step and narrow in that scope of sale. Ideally, and typically, I imagine for some of your clients, it's going to be in lockstep with the digital tools you're selling and supporting. So what's that content that those tools are hungry for? And that's what you can provide. And then the second piece on that is teach and define the process for your clients on how it is you receive and deliver requests. So you are the captain of your creative process ship. If you don't sit them down and be like, okay, when you need design stuff, here's what you do. Do you call? Do you email? Do you Slack? Do you Signal? Whatever it is, like you can make it up. Whatever you do, here's a Google form. But you have to codify your process to receive requests from your clients, and they know exactly what the expectations are. The number one mistake I see people make is that, you guess what the number one tool they use to receive creative requests from their clients?
Email.
Bingo, email. Hey, this is what I need. There's no format, there's no specifications, there's no process whatsoever. And so then you're like, well, you forgot this, or what about this? And it just is creating this unnecessary back and forth. So Design Pickle, we have a super defined request form. You log in, you pick your request type, all the specifications are there. We do that because it makes sure that when we receive the request, we know what to do. And the same goes on your end for the client. So define your process prior and have it set up with your clients. They will love it though, because they know that, they know exactly what to do. They know exactly what the expectations. And then the third thing is super simple.
Well, before you go to 3, let me
go
reiterate
for
on
it.
that, because I think that's a great point. And so if it's Design Pickle that you're working with and they're telling you exactly what they need to start, you should just mirror that, right?
Whatever,
like whoever is, like it should just match on both ends. And that's a lesson that we learned the hard way over and over again when we were offering white label services. Is people will go promise things and then come back to us and be like, well, why would you, we would never promise that. Why wouldn't you have talked to us first? Or so just align your intake with their intake and everyone's on the same page there.
Totally. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just match it up. And the third thing, and this is a bit of a nuanced one, is manage your costs and manage your delivery timelines appropriately. Now, we offer a pretty reliable system of delivery and cost, very reliable in cost. It's the same price every month. Delivery times is dependable, but is always variable based on the request type, the complexity, and things like that. So typically it takes about 30 to 60 days for a client who's using us actively to if I do this widget, this is how much it takes. If I do this widget, this is how much it takes. Then those things are pretty reliable. So what you need to do is just make sure you understand that from your own provider, and then you can sell on the other end accordingly with the right expectations, understanding what's going on in the back end. Where I always got messed up as an agency is I would promise delivery timelines to the client with undependable delivery timelines from my providers.
Yeah.
So then I was like trying to keep this promise to the client and stressing out because my creative was taking so long, or I wouldn't hear from them, or they're, there's all these things. So just make sure those new things are matched up. And by the way, I don't recommend copying our value proposition. Feel free, agencies watching this, to charge by the hour, charge by the revisions, charge by the project. Don't try to be unlimited flat rate graphic design to your clients. You don't have to be. Use that as your secret sauce if you want to use our service, or have a contractor or vendor that does it. Just make sure your supply is known, it's fixed, it has the reliability to sell into it, whatever it is you're doing. And I, by the way, love conceptualizing and modeling all of that. So I don't know how you communicate, but you can find my email out there. I won't say it, but you can just search, super easy, and find it. If any of you watching this want to brainstorm how to sell and pricing models and all of that, I nerd out about it. So that's something I get super stoked about.
Nice. Well, so let me ask you a question. Because this is what I would always recommend, is when you get something that you're, like you said, once you get into a flow of like, okay, Facebook covers, I know that they turn these around in 48 hours every time. So maybe I'm going to say it'll be done within a week, right? Always give yourself a little padding just in case. But if you get something you haven't done before, can I come to you guys and say, hey, this is what I got. Here's all the stuff. What do you guys estimate on a timeline here? Because I'm not going to promise it until I hear from you guys.
Right. So we're about to hit 1.5 million requests this week. So chances are we've seen it before. Chances are there's something in there. And usually your first request is understanding and dialing it in, and the timelines will always get better. So I would just say, for the most part, like, look, unless you're doing a 100-page catalog as your first request, which I never recommend, typically the design deliverables, you're going to get a first draft in a day or two, and max maybe same day, like between that same day to 24, 48 hours. And then it's like, how many revisions, how good is it? Like where is it in the brand? And those timelines contract over time to be very, very tight. And frankly, for any designer, not just Design Pickle designers, but the more repetition, the better the process and the system can be. So if it is something new, if you're selling something new, my best recommendation is just have a generous enough timeline for your clients when you're going into that sales conversation. But sign up for the service in advance, test it with internal deliverables, get a feel for the service, understand what's going on, eat that cost, which by the way is not a lot. And then you can be confident in terms of your quoting and estimation to the clients. Because and this goes for any creative service provider, no request is similar based on the brand, the complexity. You might have one client who every time is like, I love it, post it. And then other clients who's like, I just showed it to my wife, my brother, my in-laws, I need 400 revisions. And, so everything will be different from a timeline perspective.
Yeah. And that's really the name of the game, right? Because once you get into the flow of knowing how long things take, there's real arbitrage in that, right? If you're selling $500 social media banner packets, and that, you're getting them back in 48 hours, but you're selling it as you'll get it in a week, you can really kind of stack projects up, and, you've paid off your $1,000 to Design Pickle in day 2 or whatever. And now, you know what I mean? So there's a real opportunity when you get good at this, especially if you go back to the low cost retainer model where people aren't even using it, but they're just paying for it because they know that they want to someday. It can really become profitable.
And here's a shocking thought. You promise a week and you deliver it in 3 or 4 days.
Right.
It's called under promise, over deliver, which I know as agencies, sometimes it's hard for us to do, but that's the beauty of this thing is like, you could quote average timelines. The clients are gonna be like, okay, cool. I'm not sure. Sure. That sounds fine. And then you get it off the press faster. You're like, hey, by the way, we got this done 2 days early. The client's going to be like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. They don't know. So you can actually stack in extra client value add once you feel that system out, but your cost theoreticals are right on. I mean, think about, how does one client pay for your provider of creative services? And then anything other than that within a certain volume of output is profit. And that's coming back to that selling mentality. But you only can do that with a defined deliverable set, defined process, and fixed cost provider model of creative services.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're not selling creativity right now, it might be hard to conceptualize, but it's not linear, right? Like I don't feed in one project and then I can't get another one going until after the first one's done. No, it's like things go for revision. And while that's being, while the creator is waiting for the feedback, they're working on the next thing and the next thing. And so once you kind of figure out the rhythm, you're like DJing these creative projects, right? You've got like five
one
or
goes
six
to the client and you get the other one going. And exactly.
But like the first one you sold is covering your costs. And now the other four are just profit. You just have to make sure that you're getting your time frames right so that people are happy. But it can be very creative once you kind of get into the flow of it.
Exactly.
Is what I would say. So I saw you use a phrase, thrive in the unsexy side of design. Is this what you meant by that? Getting good at like the business, the arbitrage of creativity?
It comes back to my old school days. So I tried to thrive in the sexy side of design. And this was like big brand launches at Dreamforce, Salesforce conference, like, banner buyouts of TechCrunch, all this cool stuff. And I made no money. And so when I got into the there's the adage of the only people who made money during the gold rush were the people selling picks and axes and the supplies. Sell the design side of the stuff that people need, not the stuff that you think they need, or you're trying to sell them on it. So the great part about it is so many of the things we need to be successful marketers require creative content. So that's a given, whether it's ad channels, social channels, but you don't have to go out there and do the big brand and here's your crazy cool Super Bowl ads and all these kinds of things. It's like, you can make a lot of money doing boring things like a podcast cover every week. And
I was going to say, what are some examples that people don't typically think of that you guys see day in and day out of like, oh, that's a good idea. That person's out there selling packets of this thing, and that's genius.
So podcast content and all the related marketing content to market your podcast episodes every week. That's one of them. Repurposing content for social media usage. So you create this, like this interview here, creating the sound bites, creating the graphics, creating the ads, creating all the stuff that can be distributed through your channels for awareness. Internal communications. Now, this depends on the size of your organization, but we so frequently forget about the comms we're using to communicate to existing clients or our employees or our partners, things like that. There's a whole world we live in, which is like the world of educational design and training manuals and boring stuff like that. So there's just these things that require, if it's like a repetitive ongoing thing that requires visual pieces, there's a chance you can sell into that and supply that for people inside of it. But it's again, the ego in me. You have to be okay doing the boring things, but that's where you can define the process. You can understand the cost structure. You can mark that up. You can make more money on it, and your margins are predictable inside of it. The big swings, the big crazy ideas, the huge fun stuff, very exciting to do, super unpredictable in terms of output and cost. And that's where most people lose money when they sell creativity.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I feel like a smart young entrepreneur could probably go look at like a Design Pickle portfolio or something and make a list of all the stuff they see and just start cold, emailing that to businesses of like, hey, here's stuff that we redesign for people all the time. Like, could we help you with any of these things? And I would look at it and be like, oh, you know what? We haven't talked about that in a long time. That thing looks like crap. I saw that letterhead last month and I meant to say something to someone, but you know what I mean? I feel like, everybody has little design things that they could improve, but it often just kind of goes overlooked or forgotten. And I think
the number one client we have, number one client, Design Pickle client. And they keep us under NDA because they don't want their competitors knowing, but I can tell you what they use us for. Outbound sales. We design sales sheets for them with their product mocked up on it, and they cold email these. They have almost 100 Design Pickle accounts. 100 Design Pickle accounts. We're doing hundreds of these outbound sales sheets every single day for them.
So meaning they're taking the target of the email and working some of their elements into the design.
So they sell a product, and basically they will find a list of brands. They'll steal their logo off the internet, put their logo, their prospect's logo on their product, and cold email them a design sheet. Hey, here's our name. Here we make these products. Here's your logo. It looks cool on our products. You should buy our products. And they've gone from 5 to 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 accounts because we basically fuel their sales motion with custom creative content. Not sexy, same thing over and over and over again. But they've found a way to monetize design. And guess what? All of their other competitors are sending generic blank stuff, and they stand out with super cool, really creative design custom, and they're killing it.
Well, so, one of the things I just thought of was we recently launched our new template library inside of High Level. And soon our customers will have the ability to add their own packs of, let's say, social media content. So I could see, going out and writing 365 social media posts for plumbers, and then going to like Design Pickle and having 365 images made, and then selling it as something I customize, but I just take it back to them and say, okay, here's their logo. So like update it on the little cartoon dude's hat, and then here's their brand color. So shift the colors to that. Like you could make a real business out of just that, delivering packets of slightly customized.
Put Tennessee here and put Nebraska here, like you just go after it. Yeah. And because those types of models, they're regional, they don't compete if you're doing similar stuff. I mean, we see that a lot in real estate, actually, with our real estate clients. We have huge brands that customize all their stuff for different agents in a localized way. We're the work engine that does all the customization. Because what you don't want to be is the marketing manager in there for 5 hours a day, doing all this. I mean, our creatives are so passionate about the job and the experience and the work that we're doing. And so we can take that on and allow you to focus on strategy, concept, other stuff that you can be selling into your business.
Is there a project that stands out in your mind that was like the craziest one you guys have ever done?
So I think of the crazy clients, not necessarily the crazy deliverables. Probably the crazy deliverables I can't necessarily talk about because they were probably inappropriate. We didn't know about it. We had to kick them off the platform. But I do remember we had Clown Tech, which is one of the world's largest leading clown training academies. They were a client for us for a while. We have had all sorts of weird products, from wellness to sexual health to all sorts of things. I mean, I've seen every product for a body part imaginable come through our system inside of that.
Do you guys do that kind of stuff, like packaging design as well?
Yeah, like we will lay out packaging, kind of like this. If you're on Amazon, you scroll down on the product and you see the layout of the package and all of that kind of stuff. That's within our wheelhouse. I'd say one of the most meaningful projects that I've come across, and I'm sure there's many more, is we did an entire permanent mural for a park recognizing fallen firefighters. And that was like a really cool, meaningful project, super custom illustrated, permanently put up in a park. Wow. So there's weird, there's meaningful, there's cool. I mean, like I said, we've done, 1.5 million requests. So they've been in there. There's something for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, my last question was, what's next for Design Pickle? I know you teased a couple of things that you can't talk about. Is there anything that you can talk about that's coming down the line?
So what I can talk about is a real push into just really robust file management. One of the things that I joke about is, like the last big innovation in file management was like Dropbox and Google Drive, just like their existence. We haven't really seen anything left since that. So something we're really asking ourselves is, what about the life cycle of an asset? How do we learn? If I see a design file, what are the assets that have been used? Where else have they been used? If I update this, there's usually all these things that I'm not thinking of that also are related and correlated. So we're creating this web of connection that we're going to be launching a prototype version of next year. And then how do we better support teams with collaboration? That's not sexy, it's not new, it's not crazy, but typically you have people collaborating in email, project management. If they're really slick, there's some sort of feedback annotation tool they use, but that's also a third-party tool. And we want to bring all that into one space. So as a client, you can work with your designer, you can send things out for feedback, collect that, think about what it is you want the revision process to be. Because if I send it to my team, I don't want them to do everything. You know, I got to.
Well, that's interesting. I'd love to press you a little bit on that. Are you guys thinking of it in a, because like on one hand, I'm like, my brain's like, oh, whoa, that would be really cool if like my client could actually communicate, pass their feedback straight through. But on the other hand, I'm like, oh, that could be dangerous at the same time. How do you guys think about that when it's an agency in the middle?
Yeah. So we still want to respect because not all clients are created equal in terms of their ability to provide feedback. So we think about it, whether it's internal with teams or with our agency clients that use it with their clients. It's more like a pull, you know, like a purgatory of request feedback they collect and go through, but then the actual details and specifics and what makes it and what doesn't is still on that user to be able to push out.
Okay, but you guys could potentially replace the tools that agencies were using to gather that feedback, and it's all incorporated in the That's pretty cool, because I think a lot of agencies pay for like an Envision or something where people can leave feedback on a design.
And they're super robust and amazing companies and really big, but like for that specific use case, you really just need 10 or less % of what that tool does to accomplish the goal. So how do we put that into our process, allow clients to save money? And then, like I mentioned, new creative services. We got 2 that are fighting for prominence of what we're going to lock in, and super deep improvements to our API and our automation. So we really want to make Design Pickle's service layer, the ability to get creative outputs, even more accessible in the tools that you use. So you don't even have to log into Design Pickle. You can request, receive files, manage it all inside of the apps people already are integrated with.
That's cool. And you mentioned that you guys are already in Zapier as well, right?
We are. It's a work in progress. It's an early version. We're deep into updating the API right now, but it gets the job done. A lot of clients use it. Functionality is real straightforward. I think we have like 4 or 5 things you can do max, and then that's it. So
very cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, if you guys haven't been there before, designpickle.com is the URL. Russ, thank you so much for coming on to chat with us.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Love what you guys are doing. And when I mentioned earlier, this is not a plug for you guys by any means, but it's totally going to be a plug, is like, I wish I had high level when I was still working, because like that what you do, that was one of the things I thought of when I saw your guys' company at the event, was like, it is so easy to be an agent. Like, darn it, why can't I have had that back in my day? So I am jealous, and I'm so excited to see where you guys are headed. And thanks for letting me be a part of that.
These youngsters have it so easy these days, right?
Exactly. You don't even know.
Exactly.
I used to have to buy URLs manually myself.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks again for coming on, and thanks for watching, guys. We will see you in the next one.